We are back. It is your host, Isaiah. Welcome to the O&B Puckcast, episode number 274. We have a Flyers season preview for you in, it's our ninth one, I guess. So we're real excited about that. We're going to have a great show. Let's bring on our panel. Chef B, get your first thoughts.
Well, we got opening hockey last night. We got some games going tonight. We're just waiting another, 23 hours, 22 and a half hours now for our Flyers to play. And you know what? It can't come fast enough. It reminds me of when I was like 10 years old and Christmas was coming. You know what I mean? And this is kind of feeling I got, because as of right now, they're the best team in the Met. So, so I can't take anything away from it. It's Schrodinger's Flyers. So let's get on with it.
You got it. The great Dan Silver joining us. What's up, man?
Not too much. I'm excited for hockey. It was fun to watch some hockey yesterday, although the games were a little boring. But no, I'm ready. Bring it on. It should be fun, and we got a great show lined up. So I'm excited to talk some puck.
Okay, great. Hey, before we bring on our guests, just to remind everybody, we are brought to you by FlyersNittyGritty.com, Jim South Street. Of course, we're featured on HockeyHotStove.com. If you check out that page, front homepage, scroll down, you look for the O&B Puckcast insignia, and it'll link you to all of our YouTube shows. And of course, tonight we are live streaming on YouTube, X, Facebook. Check it out. You have some comments for us. By all means, we'll try to get to them before the end of the show. And before we get going with our guests, just a reminder, if you look at the bottom of the screen for all the video watchers tonight, Chef, it talks about some of the adjusters. And why don't you remind the folks in PA, New Jersey, and Delaware why they should call some of the adjusters instead of their insurance company?
Yeah, because one wrong word could get you denied in your claim. If you don't, they're going to get you more for your money too. These guys have been doing this for 25 years. They're one of the best in the Delaware Valley, right? They got guys that are licensed in PA, New Jersey, Delaware, soon to be Maryland, I hear. So we're covering the whole listening area. And, they're the ones that make you whole again, whether you've had a fire, flood, rain, whatever. They're the best ones in the business. You can give them a call, 215-752-0560. Just tell them that the chef sent you. That number is 215-752-0560.
Yes, and of course, for our audio-only listeners, check that out. And the video, it's going to run across the Chiron the whole time. So, okay, let's bring on, without any further ado, from HockeyHotStove.com and also Off the Post Radio, we're pleased to welcome back Anthony Mingioni. How you doing, man?
Isaiah, thanks for having me again. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's really great to have you on such a show like this. Obviously, tomorrow night, the Flyers are in Sunrise to open up against the two-time Stanley Cup champion, Florida Panthers. It's a challenge right now. And, right out of the gate, I just wanted to ask you, based on what we saw during the exhibitions and training camp, I mean, what kind of impressions do you have, considering they seem like they're in a little bit of flux and there weren't a lot of impressive performances, and some of that energy that we took going into camp didn't really translate out on the ice.
It didn't. There were fits and spurts, I guess, is one of the ways I would probably describe it throughout the preseason. Again, it's a team that, and I mentioned this in my piece, in my 5 questions piece, that was posted yesterday. It's a team that's still trying to find a through line with their coach. And the one thing I will say is I do think there is good communication between the head coach and the coaching staff and the players, but there's still a learning curve that's involved, that you're learning, how to play things a little bit differently under Rick Tocchet versus what was expected under John Tortorella and with Brad Shaw. Tocchet, it was a rather interesting comment when he talked about how the team had to learn how to play with risk and when to know, kind of, when the old story of when to hold them, when to fold them. It was that to me was indicative of a team that he feels that maybe some dangerous habits creeped in under the previous administration. and that they have to kind of be better at recognizing situations more than anything. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that I took out of, the preseason. And even as we go into the regular season, I still think there is this learning curve period that is going to exist between Tocchet and his coaching staff and the players in this case. Although I think the communication will be clear, the question is now going to be whether or not the Flyers are, how well they're going to be able to carry out what is required of them.
Right. So it's kind of like an implementation issue, and how long will that take? So they might get off to a slow start, particularly looking at the defense. Everybody's talking about it. It was kind of suspect, knowing that Ristolainen was not going to be available till sometime next month. And then they had incurred the injury with Cam York. And if you look at the lineup right now, it's tough to stomach.
It's a difficult situation, I think, for the blue line. The conversion, I know that Charlie O'Connor, my colleague, obviously, at PHLY, sent out the defensive pairs, and they basically, again, are piecing together what they can here to have three pairs that could potentially one of my biggest concerns was Egor Zamula was going to be in the top four, and based on what I saw in the preseason, he should be nowhere near the top four in that circumstance. So he currently looks like he's going to be on third pair, but the lion's share is obviously going to be, at least at the moment, seems like it's going to be Sanheim paired with Sealer, and you're going to have Drysdale paired with Adam Yinning, and then the third pair is, we will see what happens. It'll be probably likely Zamula and one of Dennis Gilbert or Noah Juleson, and that third pair gives it's got to give them some stomach churns here, because, and the thing is with Juleson, again, I thought he and Jinning had decent moments together. I'm not going to go out on a limb and say they were amazing together. They really weren't. Nobody, and that was my biggest concern going in, was I felt like the first two pairs were serviceable. I thought with York and Sanheim being there, they actually were playing very well together.
Yes.
The second pair, Drysdale had good. I thought there were some pretty good moments. During the Islanders game, I thought I was impressed that he was really like physically engaging with Anders Lee, who he's given up maybe about 25 pounds to there in front of the net, and was engaging in a way that I hadn't seen him do last season. But again, still some ups and downs in his play. Nick Sealer is Nick Sealer. You know what you're getting with him. Optimal situation is that he should be he should be on the third pairing, and Ristolainen would be on the second pairing in this case. But the blue line right now is just it's survival mode right now, and I have to think, for the goaltenders as well, this is going to make for a rather interesting start to the season when your first three games are against the two Eastern Conference finalists and the Stanley Cup champion.
Yeah, absolutely, Chef.
Well, my question would be, I didn't think Zamula should have been touching this lineup, given that everybody was healthy. But my question would be, Yinning, who actually had a decent camp, I thought he did pretty good, very serviceable, let's just say, as a bottom three. Now, do you think at any point in this, because who was his partner in Lehigh was Emil Andre? Yeah, and a lot of people are a little bitter right now, thinking that how the heck does Zamula get a shot? Even though it's the size comparison, those two playing together looked pretty good at the end of last year for the Phantoms. So do you think there was any, is it really upper management saying they got to be this big, or are they giving Andre a chance to blossom in Lehigh to get back up here, because they know that he's given away a lot of height and a lot of weight?
What Briere stated was they felt that his preseason was lacking more than anything. I think optimal scenario. I'm not the kind of person who would be looking at those three pairs and saying Emil Andre shouldn't be on that third pairing. That being said, I did witness a defenseman who struggled at times during the preseason, if I'm being quite frank, and getting back in the AHL isn't necessarily the worst thing. I strongly suspect we will see Emil Andre on the Flyers blue line at some point this season. The question is going to be, how soon will that be? And in this circumstance, I did like he and Yinning together. To me, that would be my optimal third pair in this circumstance, was because I like the fact that Yinning is, and this is what got him the job, is that he's physical, he's willing to engage, and they're looking for some safeness, I think, with their blue line in this case. And when I'm watching Egor Zamula out there on wheeling the puck, on a very obvious, he had two options. I think this was it was the Islanders game that I watched this, and he literally put the puck right on an Islander stick when he had the options of wide open plays to continue to move the puck around. It was just decision-making by Egor Zamula was just baffling to me in the latter part of camp. Just like I remember saying, to Bill Meltzer, my colleague at Hockey Outside, I was like, he's playing like he needs corrective lenses. That's the only way I could pretty much describe it. It was just like, what are you seeing that makes you decide to make that play? And that's where things kind of got in flux. That's where things are kind of in flux with the blue line. So it came down to which is the guy that's not going to completely put us in harm's way when he's out there on the ice. And that's how Adam Yinning got this job, basically. He wasn't even on the radar of the team pretty much going into camp. They assumed he was going to be in Lehigh, but that kind of also is kind of like the sound of one hand clapping. It's like there's nobody's stepping up to say, hey, we're trying to grab the job. And Yinning basically, I don't want to say he got it by default. He earned the job, but just because of everybody else being kind of, during
imploding
preseason.
Sometimes.
Yeah, it was just a strange thing. And I think that, Andre, had he had a better camp, I think he possibly would have knocked on the door a little bit more and made them think about having him in there, especially after you would think right after York's injury, in this circumstance, that this would have been an optimal time for him to come up. But again, I do think at least early especially with 2 out of 3 games against Florida, who are just, Sherman tanks up front, that they want to be able to kind of match some of that physicality. How that will work, how that will play out, we will see over the next between now and Monday. So in the first 3 games of the season, and then I think they'll be making decisions as we go along with how this blue line's gonna go, because again, they're just trying. It just feels like they're just trying to put together a lineup to survive.
Yeah, Dan, let's get you to weigh in.
I mean, I just think it's unbelievable, the treatment of Andre. I don't know. I mean, I watched the preseason games. I thought he was much better than Egor Zamula in the preseason. I thought he was much better than Noah Juleson in the preseason. I thought he was much better than Dennis Gilbert in the preseason. I would say at worst, you could say that he was the 4th best Flyers defenseman in preseason. I think that the only reason that he's down is because he's not 4 inches taller than he currently is. I mean, you talk about needing physicality against Florida. He's a more physical defenseman, by the way, than Egor Zamula, who is like not physical at all. He's bigger, but I don't know, does he ever take the body? I don't see it that often. I think at least Andre will stand up sometimes to guys. Does he make stupid plays in the neutral zone sometimes? Sure. I just think he's a much better defenseman than most of the guys here. I'm kind of surprised that, because for me, I think that the reason that he's not in the lineup is because they already have Drysdale and York, who are 2 somewhat smaller defensemen. So I'm somewhat surprised that with York out, that they wouldn't replace that in the lineup with Andre. Maybe I'm completely missing the boat. I saw that on Andre, we've talked about this before. I thought that there were stretches last year where he was literally the best defenseman on this team. I thought that there was a 2 to 3 game stretch where on the power play, he was the best power play defenseman on the team. And then he kind of fell apart after he missed some time with injuries. I know that Anthony DeMarco kind of floated out there, potentially the Flyers looking at maybe packaging Andre with someone like Owen Tippett to get like a Bowen Byram. I do think that probably other teams around the NHL are going to value Andre more than the Flyers do right now, because I just think it's preposterous that Noah Juleson, Dennis Gilbert, and Egor Zamula are potentially in this lineup, and Adam Ginning, and Andre isn't. Like, I think it's ridiculous. This defense is a mess right now, and we'll see what happens. But Urson was not particularly good in the preseason. I don't know how long he's going to hold on to that job if he continues playing the way that he is. So, and we'll get to the forwards, but there's also some stuff there that is kind of like a little weird to me. So we're just entering the season, and I just think that there's some stuff that's a little bit weird. But we'll see what happens early on here.
I do think, and again, I have no doubt in this circumstance, the Flyers, their two defense signings were, obviously Juleson and Gilbert. And Juleson, we know why, because of Tocchet's familiarity with him in Vancouver. That doesn't mean this is a case where, again, to me, Juleson is at the height at top level. If you have everybody in there, is at best a 7th or 8th defenseman, in case, if you feel like you need to have a more physical presence on the blue line, there's moments where you can put in, but you should have that ice time should be fairly limited. Again, I would prefer Emil Andre being up. I've been public with that on Off the Post. There's things of his game that I think are better than Jamie Drysdale's. And I've been public with that. The one thing I will, I do know in Anthony DeMarco's piece, he was talking about that, I think one of the Eastern Conference executives that he spoke to stated that for a player of his size, they wish Andre was a little bit faster. To me, Andre is kind of like, could be a Torrey Krug type. I've always kind of felt that about him. And I do think at a certain point in his career, that is a potential projection for him going forward. And there's obviously great value in that. I just feel like also that while they have York and they obviously traded the 5th overall pick in the draft in exchange for Drysdale, that they want to give Drysdale as much time as they can. And that they're just loath to have 3 defensemen that are undersized on that blue line. And again, we can disagree with it from now until we're all blue in the face. That's kind of where things are right now. And I will say this, you look at how teams project, you look at Florida, you look at a lot of the really good teams, they've got, big skilled blue liners. The Flyers obviously don't have that at the moment. You have a Travis Sanheim. And then after that, you're going to Ristolainen, who has improved in his, under Brad Shaw, but not to the point of what people thought he was going to be in his draft year. And then, of course, you've got obviously defensemen in this circumstance that they're trying to develop over the long term. But again, where they're at, blue line wise, they're nowhere near where those other teams are, and that's something that needs to be an area that they have to focus on in the next couple of years in terms of the blue line.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. I just want to point something out. So and this, I guess this is going to sound optimistic, but even if we had the optimal lineup right now of, York and Sanheim, and then you had Sealer and Drysdale, and even if that third pairing was the best of what they got, which would, in my opinion, is Yinning and what do you call it?
Risto?
No, not even Risto, because I don't believe he's going to be back. Andre. So Yinning and Andre, do we even, collectively, do we even feel that that's not even something I'm
in other words, if York was healthy,
yes,
or York was healthy, would Andre be figuring into this blue line? At least in the early going, the answer is probably no. They sent him down. And again, Briere's comments were what they were about Andre, that their evaluation of him in this camp was, I would say maybe a little disappointing, but kind of maybe that's the shade of what they were hoping that somebody was going to really pop.
Yeah. And nobody did.
And nobody did. And are they going back to the whole, well, if we don't have anybody popping, then we got to make our blue line safe to be able to, cover defensively in the zone. And Juleson obviously has one of the things I'll say about Juleson is that obviously he does have an understanding of Tocchet's systems, the box +1. But base that off the fact that when I'm watching him on the ice and he looks like he's got, he's skating in cement.
Yes.
That's not going to do much for you if you're trying to. Because my whole thing is with the Flyer blue line is why I would want an Andre out there is that I want to would have a blue line where you have the ability to transition quickly. And if you had York, if you had Drysdale and you had Andre, you'd have three pairs with three defensemen that you could count on if you're trying to really attack to be able to get up the ice quickly. And they only can really do that right now with two pairs. And right now it's more like one pair at best. And you're asking Sanheim. And again, I loved York and Sanheim together. And I know Taka talked about in camp about possibly separating them in pairs, but they were so good together that he obviously couldn't. But then you got to look at your other pairs and you're looking at, again, Drysdale, who has to improve in his own end in addition to being able to play. And I think there's something to that. I said this to somebody. I said, the better Jamie plays in his own end, and I don't need him to be big and physical or anything like that, I think it does feed into his offensive confidence. And when he doesn't do it in his own end, it kind of bites, it takes away because he feels like almost like he's cheating on the play. And I do wonder whether or not, Tortorella having him as the quote rover and having him just focus on offense and not as much on defense. And really feel like he got yo-yoed. And now they're trying to figure that out, I think, right now.
Well, he's only 23. It's not, it's not like you got to give up on him and anything. Right. And at least I'm hoping he gets enough play with at least Sealer because at least, there's a little more freedom there. Sealer's a more stable.
Once York is back, then you can have him with Sealer. For now, he's going to be with Yinning, which is basically like having a kind of a little bit of a lesser version of what. Because honestly, Sealer and Yinning basically stylistically, you might as well be the Swedish. You might as well be the Swedish Sealer in this case.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so, pursuant to your 5 questions article, you were talking about can Ursan and or Vladar get off to good starts. And your thing, Anthony, I think about is like, I think this is a type of situation where the guy who wins the job, because it does seem like there's a competition, it will be occurring. Ursan's going to get the first chance because the organization has a certain feeling about him. Yeah. But I think that it's going to be a max of like 45 starts either way, because Ursan hasn't had, neither one has shown a lot of durability. And I think Vladar has only had a max of 30 games as it is.
Yeah.
And then we might have to see Kolosov, and nobody wants to see that grenade go off in goal.
No, but there was things in the I thought there were moments in the preseason when I watched Kolosov that it's not a case where I think he's an NHL starter per se. I don't know yet. It's too early in his career to say that. But I saw some things where I was kind of looking at him and going, maybe he's now settled down a little bit and realizes, this is where he's going to be. He doesn't have the fallback of Minsk anymore after they signed Zach Fucali because he was the best goalie in the KHL.
Yeah, in the KHL, right.
So it's like, okay, you may think you want this, but settle yourself down now because now you need to give yourself. And I think he listened probably to his aide. Dan Milstein probably got into his ear and said, you want a shot in North America, you need to do what you need to do at the AHL level in order to prove yourself to get up to the NHL level, because he was the definition of undercooked chicken chef, as in net last year.
Nobody wants that.
Exactly. So Vladar fascinates me a little bit though, because the combination of his size, I thought his fluidity from post to post was pretty good. Now, again, a big guy can make that look, pretty effortless. I thought he was doing a fairly good job of being able to see through traffic. That was one of the first things I'm kind of looking for out of him. Obviously, he had the big stick handling error against the Devils, which was a big, and he's had those moments in his career where he makes that sort of brain fart kind of mistake that's kind of held him back. But again, former second round pick. So when the Bruins originally drafted him, the idea was that he could potentially be a long-term starter. But as we know, goaltenders take their time, and he goes from Boston to Calgary, but then they have Markstrom there. So we knew how that was going to basically work out. And then last year he had his opportunity to have the starting job with a rookie and Dustin Wolf next to him. And it was interesting. The first half of the season didn't go great, injury concerns, things of that sort. Wolf takes the job. Yet when Vladar's back, he's placed particularly well in relief of Wolf. Once it was known that Wolf was going to be the starter. But he wants to be an NHL starter, and this is it. I mean, honestly, he's 27 years of age now. This is his opportunity here that if he's going to prove himself to be an NHL starter, it's going to be here. But it's, the blue line that's in front of him right now is going to be, obviously a major, going to be a concern. So I can't tell you heads or tails how this goaltending is going to be, and how much of it will, how well they'll play, especially with the blue line being as threadbare as it is right now. But if any one of them kind of is able to grab, take a hold of the job in this case, it's going to be interesting. I will say this is that, do I feel a little bit better about the Flyers goaltending situation this year than obviously last year with Fedotov trying to figure out 3 guys? For sure. I feel at least better, but we don't know for sure until we get into the real games.
Yeah. Dan, I know you're a Vladar hopeful at least.
Yeah, I like Vladar. I talked about it here before. I think that in Boston, Jeremy Swayman was the guy that franchise sort of gravitated towards. And then in Calgary, as you mentioned, I don't think he was ever going to be the guy there with Dustin Wolf being there. I mean, you see what kind of contract Calgary just signed Dustin Wolf to. I mean, it's arguably the biggest contract that a goalie of that age has ever signed in NHL history. I think Calgary is very, very committed to him. And I've always liked Vladar. I thought he's had a lot of potential. I kind of compare what I feel like he could do this year for the Flyers to what Anthony Stolarz did with Toronto last year. He's similarly sized and similar type of age. I'm a big fan of, what I think, what he could do for the team this year. And I've never been a particularly huge fan of Samuel Ersson. I mean, he's never really shown me in a long stretch that he could be a top starting NHL goalie. So I think that Vladar has a really good chance to end up playing more games than Sam Ersson. And I think he has more. I think that there's more ceiling with Vladar, even though Ersson is younger than him, just because I think Ersson has had a pretty fair shot here since Carter Hart was gone to try and sort of establish himself as a really strong starting goalie. Now, the defense core has never been that great in front of him, right? But it's not going to be very good this year. So we'll see what happens. But so ultimately, I'm hopeful that Vladar, for the reasons that Anthony, you mentioned, I mean, he's got the size, he's got some mobility. This is his opportunity, right, to be that starting goalie. So my guess is that, Ersson's the starter. Early on, he's getting more of the share of the starts, but gun to my head, I think Vladar is going to be the guy who actually has a better season. Does that mean
I would say this, that the kind of the way the schedule breaks, they do have the opportunities here to kind of alternate between the two, the way that the schedule is at least early on set. So I think they're going to get equal looks depending on, the opponent. Obviously, I think Ersson will get the start against Florida. I think there's a decent chance. And again, if Ersson has a really good game against Florida, he likely gets the Carolina game as well. But if it's one of those games where it's kind of an okay start for him, would they hesitate to go to Vladar? I don't think they would.
So so what do you mean exactly by that? Because they don't have their first back-to-back until November. So are you considering that when they have a game and then another game 2 days later, that's a normal opportunity to switch?
I think so. I think it's enough time to kind of get a good bearing on both goalies. I think that's the way I look at it. I think that's how I kind of view it early on, is that they can evaluate. And I'm sure they want to, obviously, if someone has a good start, they want to reward. But again, I think they're an Briere said it going into the offseason, when it came to the goaltending, everything is under evaluation. And that evaluation continues even now. So, that's how I view it in this circumstance.
Mm-hmm. So there is an interesting Chef, you want to cut in with one other point?
Yeah, with the goalies. I agree with Dan on Vladar. I've heard a lot of, other podcasts and other people writing and all this stuff saying that if he gets above 30, 35 games, that this is a failure for I don't necessarily buy that. I think he has a big chance here to pretty much steal a job if that's what he, like that was his career, intentions when with signing here was like, hey, I'm going to do whatever I can to steal a job. People have broken up. Like if Sam plays more than 55, which I don't think he's going to play more than 50, to be honest. I don't think the way the schedule is and it lays out like that. And I just think that when you get a string of 2 or 3 games, like back-to-backs, when there's a couple of them in within the weeks, I think Ladar has got a chance to really shine there. And I don't think he gets to that point. And also, and then I'll just say one thing too. Is Ladar, is he going to play for the Czech Republic? Is he good enough to play for them in the Olympics if they're?
I mean, would he be one of the goalies that would be in terms of starting?
3. Yeah,
I think
one of the 3. I think he makes it.
I mean, I think it very much depends on his. Again, he has to build enough of what I would say is a resume this season to be in the thing for the starting for a starting gig in this case.
So there's a lot.
I think he'll be in the mix. I mean, I'm sure he'll be under consideration, but for him to be at that point, because it's been. I mean, we get through that. We don't want to obviously. I mean, I don't have all the roster with all the goalies on in front of me here to say which amongst the Czech netminders in this case. But there's, it's also been a little while since we've had a stretch of really good Czech goalies in the National Hockey League too.
Yeah, I mean, I think not to cut you off. I actually think that one of the best young goalies in the league is Czech Lukas Dostal from Anaheim.
No, after Dostal, I think is probably the guy I would say is
he's one of my favorite young goalies, and then Karel Vejmelka is a pretty good goalie. But
Vejmelka will be in the mix too.
I think that Vladar certainly has a shot to be the backup. I love Lukas Dostal, but
yeah, and we'll see again with Dostal having we're going to see how everything kind of shakes out in Anaheim this year. Now that he doesn't have John Gibson there, and he now has the full reins.
That team's going to be interesting to watch.
Yeah,
everybody's fascinated by Anaheim. That was a discussion we had today. Kevin Allen and us, we were discussing out west, and he's like, "Yeah, Anaheim's just fascinating. They're just how that all will shake out. And Carlson's
like I love that kid.
Marchman Carlson. I mean, there's a chance there if under Quenneville, if he can get them all started in the right direction, right early from jump here, Anaheim will be interesting for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's talk about what the Flyers are doing with 2 of the rookie players, Jetlichenko, again, kind of like a repeat of what they did last year, maybe with the intention that he could actually stick around this time, and Nikita Kurbenkin. And it seems as if neither one might play against Florida, tomorrow night. But what do you think? What do you see from them, and what do you think about the Flyers' strategy in making the team, and what kind of roles do you think they'll play?
I think it's not all that uncommon for NHL teams to kind of at the start of the season go with some of the guys they're familiar with already, the veterans. And I think the opponent Florida's a heavy lineup, and we all saw what happened in that preseason game between the Panthers and the Lightning. And
it was kayfabe.
Teams do think about that. They don't want liberties to be taken with some of their young stars in this case. Again, I'm not the biggest Nick Delorier fan on the ice, but this is one of those games where I'm not surprised to see that they're not rotating him out of the lineup, that he, already is, they've already kind of experimented a little bit with, I think Charlie had Luchenko actually rotating with Obels on the, or something. Well, that was at center.
Yeah,
and then
I saw that as well.
Then there was a left wing rotation. So they're looking at Luchenko on the left wing. It's Luchenko's preseason was one that was kind of, when I talk about fits and spurts, I kind of think about Jet Luchenko, where he had, one of those things where you want to see a little bit more, then you get a flash of something a little bit more. And then there's times when he's turning over the puck. And it's just, again, I look at Jet as being a young player. The AHL rule kills me with him. I know. It's like he would be perfect to play for the Phantoms. He really would. Because I think he's just I saw enough of him that I feel like that would have been perfect. And the fact that the option is to return to Guelph, which is not a particularly good OHL team, that's what they're scared about. They're worried about, I think, his development stagnating there. So they'd rather have him on a sort of a tutoring situation here where he gets in and plays a bit, plays it's in certain circumstances, and other times he doesn't. Grabenkin, on the other hand, again, that was another fascinating just watching him and going into camp. It was like, I like things about Grabenkin, but there's some maturity to his game, I think, that needed to come into play a little bit. But he impressed me in the preseason. He really did. And again, I know it's preseason hockey, but he understands if I'm going to be in the NHL, this is what I have to do. I have to be basically, and I want to see things in terms of his play transition wise. I think that is actually pretty good. But I think he understands that whatever line he's on, he's going to be the guy that's going to be in the net area. He's got to be around that area. And I think he's particularly effective in that spot because when you have other line mates that, are maybe a little bit more perimeter, darting in, darting out, having that one constant presence that can be around the net. And it was interesting because I remember that first Islander game, he acted more as an agitator. I remember Scott Mayfield got a little, under, and he was sort of grinning at him, and Grabenkin was. But then he kind of didn't do that. He kind of, I don't know if he was kind of told not to do too much of the agitation bit and to focus more on his play in front. And I've liked Grabenkin. I think he's been particularly good. I do kind of understand. I'm not going to make a big deal about the fact that he's not playing against Florida in the opening game because, again, I do think coaches tend to go with veterans initially early and all lineups are in flux. But he's a guy that, again, fits a lot of different spots in the lineup. And that's the one thing about him that I think fascinates Tocchet is that he's a guy that he thinks he could potentially put on, could put on different lines. You put him on a line with a Couturier and Konechny or Michkov and maybe Michkov and Zegras and him maybe a little bit. It's fun, but it may be a little risky.
Okay,
from both sides of the ice. But I'm fascinated with Grabenkin and talking to people. Obviously in Toronto, we had Steve Dangle-Glynn on our podcast, and Steve was Toronto people are just kind of shaking their heads at that trade still. They did not want to. A lot of people probably did not want to give up Grabenkin, and the fact that happened with a pick was something where it was just like the acknowledgement was, you got one on us, basically, because they were very high on, a lot of Toronto media corps was very high on Grabenkin. My co-host, Mike Augello, also very high on Grabenkin. So I think he was a get for Philadelphia in this circumstance. We're going to see where he kind of fits in, but I think there's a very good chance that he's, unless he really struggles when they put him in, he's got a chance, I think, to stay in the lineup well into the season. Luchenko, we're going to have to see about. Philly, I'm sure, would love to for Guelph to make a decision and just say, hey, deal him to an OHL team that's got more offensive firepower. And I think there's stuff in there. I think there's an offensive gain to Jet Luchenko, but I do think he has to have some players alongside of him to help coax that out of him as well.
Yeah, just one thing, and then Chef, I'll go to you. I've heard that Guelph actually upgraded their personnel, and we're going to
see. I want to see how it plays out to start the season. So the hope is that they have, but based off of last season, it was obviously not the best scenario in this case. But I think Philly would. Again, we'll see where they decide. And when they put Jet into the lineup, it's going to be up to him to show to the Flyers that he can stay here in the NHL level. I think some of with the preseason when I'm watching him as well was I think he was kind of focused. He's like, well, if I'm going to be in the NHL, I'm going to be on the fourth. I'm going to be on the fourth line, so I can't be taking too many risks, and I got to focus more on the defensive aspect of things. But then it was cases.
That's not a good thing, though. It's
not, because then you're not getting everything out of him that you should be able to get out of him.
Yeah. That Chef?
So do you think that they're playing a little bit of chicken now with, Gulp? Like saying, hey, we're going to hold him here. He can play 9 games. He can be here till like friggin' Thanksgiving. Just as long as he kept under the 9 games and to hold him and hopefully maybe force a trade. I know a lot of people were talking about that, but
I don't think it's a case where they can kind of force it, but they would kind of hope that depends on the start that Guelph has too. If they start off, they may have upgraded personnel, but if they're scuffling in the first couple months of the season, and things aren't working, then you're going to move Luchenko for as many assets as you possibly can if you're Guelph.
Yeah.
But I think it very much depends on how they start this year. Will determine whether or not. Now, again, if they start off well, then you feel fine sending him back to Guelph.
Yeah.
That's kind of where they're at right now. I think it's very much a wait and see thing there to see how that team probably starts in the O. Mm-hmm. And if they look like they're better than last year and it'll be a better situation for Jet, then maybe in that case they send him down.
And pertaining to that fourth line, I think Gurbenkin's probably going to get 3-1 or 4-1 games than Nick will. Delorier. I just think that hopefully that'll play out like that.
I would certainly. I get the starting of the season with against
some
Florida.
Heavy hitters. Yeah.
I'm not saying I'm in agreement with him. I would certainly rather have Gurbenkin in the lineup than Delorier, because I think you're going to get a little bit more in that regards. But maybe they're conscious of the fact that they don't want to completely throw. Maybe they just don't want to throw them in the deep end of the pool with the Sharks, so to speak. With the Panthers in this case, and that maybe the next game they play against Carolina are like, all right, this is a different opponent here. This is, we'll see what you do if they decide to have him in. But it was interesting that they didn't have him in on any kind of line rushes here of any kind, whereas they did with Luchenko. Yeah. But again, I'll wait till Friday going into Saturday to see how Tocchet decides to deploy his lines then and the line rushes then, and to see. But I know Tocchet's been working with him one-on-one.
Yeah.
That is a big thing. That tells you that Tocchet, if it was a case where he wasn't thinking about him, that but they're not necessarily ready to use it yet, at least in game one.
Well, as compared to like the bottom pairing, if it's like Gurbenkin, Obels, and Hathaway as my fourth line, I'm not necessarily too unhappy with that. That line's got a lot of potential.
It could.
Got some good agitators. Got some fairly solid.
Obels. The thing is with Obels is that he spent the majority of the preseason playing on the wing. Mm-hmm. So, and I kind of early on in the camp he looked phenomenal, and then I think things kind of he was settling more into what would be a fourth liner's role. But it was interesting because again, he earned, and I think he did earn onto the roster in this case, and it's one of those cases where you do want to see a bit of meritocracy. And Tocchet was kind of sparing in his praise a little bit with Obels. Trending towards an NHLer, and then obviously did enough to be at least on the initial roster and to be potentially their fourth line center to start. But I liked his instincts, Obels on the wing versus him playing at center. They know they can play at center in this case, but how good will he be as the fourth line center? I guess that's an area that I think they're trying to figure out right now.
Yeah, Dan.
Yeah, I'm confused and kind of baffled at a lot of the things that it looks like we're going to be seeing for the first game. And it's very early and it's a feeling out period with Rick Tocchet. So I can just go with sort of my reactions to some of the stuff so far. I think it is a little strange to not have Gurbenkin getting any reps with any of the regulars in practice and trending towards having Delorier in that opening night lineup. It just is such like it just feels like such an old school coach thing to do. It just gives me shades of some of the stuff that John Tortorella was doing. I mean, now it's not like that Nikita Gurbenkin's parents are going to be at that game in Florida. As we know, Torts used to love benching people in front of their parents, which is just vindictive. But, I'm sure Gurbenkin will get into the lineup. I just thought he was particularly impressive in preseason and probably deserved to make that opening night roster, but it's not the end of the world. I'm a little more confused about kind of what he's doing with the lines, just because, and we don't know what they're going to be, right? Maybe what he's been doing in practice is not going to be opening night actual lines. I thought that Michkov and Zegras kind of developed a lot of chemistry together, both on the power play, which I'm sure they will both be on power play one.
I would, they were already on power play.
But I actually thought that they had some pretty good chemistry, even strength. And I actually never really thought that Couturier and Michkov developed all that much chemistry last year at even strength. I mean, Michkov can pretty much play with anyone, and I guess those guys were okay together. But I was just sort of excited by the fact that we might get to see Zegras and Michkov out there, not only for the power play when, look, we might only get 2 to 3 power plays a night, right? But I was kind of excited to see them at even strength. And I thought maybe that was an opportunity to maybe put a guy like, Christian Dvorak on left wing with those two guys, if you wanted to add in some defensive responsibility to that line. So it just seemed a little strange to me that you have Zegras and Michkov together pretty much all preseason, and then now you're going to split them up and put Couturier with Michkov, and then put Zegras with Konechny. Obviously, all 4 very good players. That's just a little puzzling to me. So I kind of want to see how that plays out.
And that could honestly change, Dan. That could literally change in the second period.
Right. So that's why I'm saying, like, all I can react to is what it looks like is what's going to happen, while understanding that a lot of these things might change. But, between that and sort of the lack of Andre, it's just sort of some puzzling things that give me a little bit of pause. I mean, it's like, it's sort of like San Jose's got Michael Misa and Sam Dickinson making the roster, but they're not, looks like they're going to be healthy scratches for the first game. It's like really? Like
it happens. I mean, there's teams that do, Dan, this happens. I mean, with the young players, when they initially make the roster, teams, I think coaches are reticent to throw them into the deep end of the pool immediately. Hockey, we could counter and say hockey players are hockey players. They should be able to handle it in this case, but they just are.
I just don't
like to see them take some risk, but I think they initially early on like giving them sort of maybe the upper view, the overview from, I'd say press box view in this case, but to kind of see how this all kind of works at full NHL speed.
I mean, I sort of think that it's just such an old school mentality. And to me, the deep end is like playing back-to-back games against 2 tough lineups. I mean, I don't know what's the big deal about, Frank Nazar was pretty awesome against Florida last night. I don't know if you guys watched that game, but
part of it,
I think was that his first NHL game?
No. Nazar's played. He's played.
But regardless, I guess my point is that I don't really know how playing a guy opening night on the 4th line is throwing them into the deep end when you're looking at a decision of Gulbenkian versus Nicolas Deslauriers. I don't know, when you look at a team that's got Matthew Tkachuk out and that's got Barkov out, I don't know. I won't be surprised if the Flyers put up a pretty good effort against that squad. Chicago, who's projected to be one of the worst 2 or 3 teams in the league, certainly looked okay against Florida. So anyway, it's just not really a mentality that I necessarily understand. I'm sort of interested to see kind of what happens, and as we go along with the season, as you said, I'm sure there's going to be a ton of changes going on. I can just react to sort of what I'm seeing in the moment. And I love the fact that Tocchet he talked about in interviews before the season that he loves getting out there, teaching kids one-on-one. I know he's been working with Michkov a lot after practice. So, it's very early on in the Rick Tocchet era. I can just give my impression so far of what I've seen and some of the things that I think are maybe a little bit puzzling, but we'll see how it pans out.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we want to keep in mind, and even this is still in flux, is that Tocchet said he likes pairs, and he's still trying to figure those out. I mean, you had Zegras and Michkov, and it appears like you were saying, Couturier and Michkov are a pairing, and Zegras and Konechny, he's trying that as a pairing. Obviously, the Cates, Brink, and Forster line gives them stability right out of the gate, something they can count on.
But I would say that gives you a bit of an understanding here of kind of how the coach, he's looking for that the one line that you saw during preseason, that the minute they were put back together with Tyson Forster in his first start, it was just like they didn't miss a beat from where they were late last season. It's just, you can't kind of explain, I hate to use the phrase chemistry, but it kind of is. Guys just know, intrinsically know where they're supposed to be on the ice, how they're supposed to execute the systems as they were. And again, it is preseason, not against NHL level lineups, but that was one you knew almost immediately once it clicked. I was like, well, that line's going to pretty much start from night one.
Right,
but
exactly.
The pairings I still think things are kind of fluid even with those pairs. Like, again, you have to remember that preseason is a time for experimentation. So too sometimes is the opening 10 games of the regular season too, to see within the first 10, you're just looking to see what's going to click, what's going to work. Starting from the line pairing idea, which I know it's the Bowman principle. It's also the hit. When I first started covering the Flyers, it's the Hitchcock. Hitchcock operated exactly the same way. So it's not a bad idea, because I think what it does is, and this is the big thing that I was not a fan of under John Tortorella, was that lines were always in a blender.
Yeah.
Always, like all season. Like, how do you expect any chemistry to ever happen if you're constantly, completely churning the lines? You have to try to give guys some time to develop together.
Yeah, I mean, one more from me, and Chef, I'll go to you. The guy who appears, especially among the fan base, to be kind of like an odd man out in the rumor mill already is Owen Tippett, and we saw him, and I think he's skating with Zegras and Konechny at this time. We'll see how that works out.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, what is the right center for a guy who needs the puck? And I'm thinking, well, if you put Dvorak at center and then you have somebody like Korbenkin to be in the corners and in front of the net, that would be like an ideal, setup for him. But how much are they going to cater to Owen Tippett if other lines are, productive with those other players in different places? Yeah.
They're in an interesting spot when it comes to Owen right now, because again, I think the minute the Flyers said the name Porter Martone, that had to be like that had to be almost immediately kind of on the radar here for Owen Tippett in terms of the long term. Now, again, you also have Tyson Forster as well, who's on a bridge deal as well, but you do have to wonder again about the long term when you see what Martone is capable of. We all saw obviously that first game playing for Michigan State, goal and assist, physically engaged, as close to a power winger type of game as you could possibly hope. Owen Tippett is a big boy, but he's not a power winger in this circumstance. And trying to figure out what will work for him, what will work line mate wise, is going to be interesting. I am fascinated by him playing with Zegras, so I will say that. I want to see how that kind of works, because we did see it briefly in the preseason when they had him with Michkov and Zegras together, and Michkov obviously does what Michkov does and literally fakes out the pass, and Tippett's waiting for it. He has his stick literally cocked ready for the shot, and he kind of brings down like, oh, I guess he's not coming my way. And these are some of the things that he has to kind of be prepared for if he is on a line with the guys like that. But because that's when he got the drop pass over to Zegras when he had the power play goal. Mm-hmm. So consistency is the name of the game for Owen Tippett more than anything. He will go long stretches where or he'll just make some mistakes on the ice that just you ask yourself, what are you looking at and what are you seeing that made you do that? So there's times when I feel like his on ice processing needs to be a little bit quicker sometimes, and that to me is. But then when he gets ahead of steam, and then he can be like the best player on the ice, carrying the puck and looking almost like a Canadian Yager carrying the puck at times, where it's just like, where is the happy medium? Where is the medium where you can get a little more of that from Owen Tippett? So I like him, but I also can see a situation here where why they might be potentially looking to move him off in the future, especially with the contract that they signed him to.
Now, Chef, you wanted to say something about Tippett, and then Dan will.
Well, let Dan do Tippett. I want to go back to Dvorak, because we haven't really talked about where he fits in this whole thing, and I think that's an interesting piece. But since we're talking about Tippett, go ahead.
Yeah,
Dan.
Yeah, I've never been a big fan of Owen Tippett. I mean, I've talked about that on the show. I hate him with Michkov and Zegras because I kind of joke that he's where pucks go to die. I mean, you give Tippett the puck and usually he'll shoot it often into the glass. He scores once in a while highlight reel goals. Like Anthony said, it's interesting. Like some of the plays he makes once every 11 games will look like something out of the Jágr playbook. When they signed him, I said I hated the contract, and now it's literally a year later and we're talking about trading him. Well, I tell you this, if depending on what happens with him, the Flyers may be having to look at a Shane Gostisbehere situation where you've got to give something away to get someone to take his 8-year contract for $6.2 million a year. I've just never been a big Tippett fan.
I think some of the calculus right now, Dan, with him is that if they are going to move him off for the cat, teams are probably looking at him would a 20-25 potential goal scorer at his current contract when the cap goes up.
Yeah.
Does that sort of become sort of the median for a 20 goal scorer that's playing on a third in a third line role? You'd have to convince another NHL team that that's something that they in fact want to do.
It's possible, but I tend to think that teams overrate other teams' desire to take on contracts like that, which is why we see guys go for peanuts sometimes. But especially if they fall out of favor with their teams. So we'll see what happens. I mean, obviously Tippett should be in a top 2-line role on this team. I mean, you're paying him $6 million. The fact that we've got Christian Dvorak as our top line left winger is again a little bit strange to me, and I know Chef will get into that a little bit. But as Isaiah talked about, Tocchet likes pairings, except for the fact that he loves our third line, which should be a line. So, like when Porter Martone comes up, maybe he'll go from liking pairings to liking a line of Matvei Michkov, Trevor Zegras, and Porter Martone, right? Like he likes pairings, maybe because there's not a third guy to go along with it. I don't know, but he certainly likes the third line as a third unit. We're not talking about the pairing there. And I think Anthony talked about that also. So we'll see what happens with Tippett. Like he's fine. I don't mind him some of the time, but I think he's a terrible fit with Zegras and Konechny because of the fact that when he gets the puck, he wants to shoot the puck typically. And those guys, just like the play that Anthony was talking about, where Zegras dropped it off to Michkov. Michkov went to the middle. I thought it was Konechny, but maybe it was Tippett open on the left wing, who was basically winding up for a slap shot and was pretty open. And Michkov just went the other direction, fooled everyone on the ice to Zegras, who scored, right? Like Tippett doesn't. Again,
when it comes to Matvei, that's just you expect the unexpected, that's right. And that's what you want.
I want a guy who can do the unexpected, like we saw in the Michigan game, and we've seen all of last year. Like Porter Martone will make behind the back passes nobody expects. Like he's a big guy, but he will make passes like Matvei Michkov does. Yeah. So like the idea of those two guys playing together, maybe with Zegras, is very exciting to me. Yeah, I guess we'll see what happens with Tippett. I just thought it was interesting that he'd already been mentioned in that trade rumor with Emil Andre. And my thought process is like, hey, Flyers, like if you thought that there was any opportunity that a year after signing this contract, you were going to be maybe thinking about trying to trade this guy, like why would you sign him to the contract?
Because I think at the end of the day, Dan, you see some things and you talk yourself into he could be this, and if we get him under this contract now,
it's a savings.
It's a savings in the long run. And then listen, we can talk about the greatest general manager. Everybody has caveat emptor at some point, buyer beware, a little bit of just regret over buyer's remorse over a contract that they signed that, hey, maybe we thought he would be something and now we're just not seeing it click to the level that we thought it would. And that's kind of where I think things are with Owen. And he's at the end of the day, it's going to be on him to kind of figure it. I think there's going to be coaching up. I certainly think Tocchet's going to be. It's one of the things he likes to do. He loves to teach. If he can get those things across to Owen and he can play him at a much more consistently in those spurts that we've seen, and that's where the Flyers kind of, I think, talk themselves into. Well, if we could get that out of him on a regular basis, then this looks great. But it just doesn't happen anywhere near enough. And that's, I think, why they're having that, why these rumors are now starting to float out there.
And really quickly, just to kind of check myself and keep myself in line, I mean, I think a lot of people complained about the Travis Sanheim contract a year after it was signed. They signed him to the 8-year deal for $6 million, $6.2 million. And we were desperate to get rid of him and trade him to St. Louis. And when that trade didn't go through, a lot of Flyers fans were upset about it. And look at what he's done, right? So hopefully a year from now, we're sitting here talking about how, man, Owen Tippett, that deal is going to be a bargain because he has really taken his game to the next level. So,
yeah, definitely. Chef, you wanted to talk about Christian Dvorak.
Well, since we're talking about the lines and marrying everybody in together, I don't, if you're talking about Dvorak on the top line or on the second line, why am I putting him with Couturier when definitely the center help, especially in the face-off region, should be with either Zegras or on the fourth line? Because
my read, Chef, has always been, I'm sorry to cut you off there.
That's okay.
To me, it was always like, if you're going to use Christian Dvorak, who's good on draws, pretty solid defensively, you almost look at him as sort of the training wheels for Trevor Zegras as he works himself into becoming a more complete NHL center. Him coming back obviously to the position again and playing in that position, because then at least if he gets tossed out of the circle, you feel like, okay, that's an easy swap out for a draw. But they haven't. They chose. And again, we could see that by second period tomorrow night. If things aren't going well and they decide to move things around, that could very well happen. So, we will see. Again, I'm always hesitant over the years to look too much into the opening night lines, knowing full well how fluid they can be.
Yeah, I just looked at it like, I will say this, even though Noah Cates' nemesis has been the face-offs in key situations, even in, sometimes even in overtime. I don't know why they think he's going to. But this preseason, I mean, he was above the 50% mark a lot. So
he's worked at it. That I do know is that was something that was an area that he very much worked on this summer. Because again, and I've always been, Noah's in another spot where it's like, I always thought that maybe he was a natural wing, but he's proven himself to be a National Hockey League center. And the one thing that remains for him to be a lock solid 3C at, really good 3C at this level is the faceoffs. And if he gets that nailed down, everything else is pretty much pretty good there when it comes to him. And you can count on him sort of in a league where centers are difficult to come by. You managed to, and you could say this about Tortorella, but at the end of the day, he saw him as being a center, and he's worked him. And Noah Cates has worked himself into being a center and a very valuable one for the Flyers.
Yeah, and also too, I'll say this because I said it last year when things were kind of fluid halfway through the last season, that I always thought that he is quite positive. Noah Cates was the perfect winger for Mitch Goff on a line on the other side, and whoever was centering them last year. I thought he's just that kind of responsibility and because he might not be the fastest, he might not be this, but his anticipation is great. And just when you think the other team's clearing the zone, there's Cates, and he's back checking, and he's feeding somebody down low, usually Forrester or Brink on the far side.
Yeah.
I just think that if that line ever starts to falter and they want to play around, I think with Mitch Goff and the Zegras, I think if you put Cates on that left wing, I think that's not going to be the worst thing in the world either.
He can fit there, but what my feeling is at this point now is that there's almost this feeling that Cates has been jerked back and forth between center and wing, and they look at it and say, we know our center depth is not fantastic, and if we have someone who is defensively advanced as Noah Cates is, and I think at this point they're at the point now where they just don't want they want him to be to have one set spot, and he's turned himself into that. And again, if the faceoffs continue to come around as they did in preseason, and he continues to do what he's doing, that's him being at center for this team is of immense value to them, I think.
Mhm. Well, one of the last questions that you had in your article today concerned the power play and how that was going to work out for the Flyers. And it's one of the areas while we're concerned about goaltending, we're concerned about defense and even some of the combinations up front. The power play there does appear to be some hope. The first unit has Drysdale with forwards Matvei Michkov. We have Trevor Zegras, TK, Owen Tippett. The second unit has Travis Sanheim. Of course, that might be Cam York if he was healthy, but in this case, it's Sanheim.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have Couturier, Brink, Noah Cates, and Tyson Forster. They showed a little bit of movement, a little more dynamic element. What was your impression, and what do you expect to happen this year?
I mean, again, they favor obviously a 4 forward, 1 defense setup, which is, I think, fine. I mean, that's what Svechkovsky's and has done. I know previously is that they prefer the 4 forward, 1 defense setup, which again, if you're trying to do the concept of what Hot Tocket wants, which is a lot of times power play, as much as we talk about structure, is also about, as he said, creating chaos for the penalty killing unit and overloading potentially things to one side and opening up opportunities in this case. Those guys, in the forward core, especially when you talk about the second unit, if in fact they're using basically the Cates line with obviously 2 additional players, we've seen them do that on a standard forecheck. That fits the modus operandi of what they are trying to do with the power play. So there were there were obviously moments where during, that things got easily flustered and broken up during the preseason. That being said, I also saw a desire to deliver on the concepts. They shot a bit more, so many times they would overpass. Yeah. They still do that, but then again, a lot of teams on a power play will do that as well. It's just trying to find that perfect situation. I want to see again what I saw in the preseason. There was certainly some encouraging signs, but I again keep that as as calm as I can. But again, I'm going to be curious to see how it is delivered. Obviously, Taka puts a great premium on it by having 2 coaches working on it along with him, with Jay Verady and obviously with Yogi Svechkovsky. So we're going to see. Again, I also go back to what I think Brad Shaw said before, is that it's the talent, that helps him, or may have been Brocky Thompson. I don't remember, I was going to quote Thompson in this case, but the talent also is really important as well as the concept. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that is all going to play out. But at least initially, I saw if you're trying to create chaos for the PK, I saw moments during the preseason where they did it, where they weren't necessarily successful at scoring the goal. But if that's the intention, to create opportunities by outnumbering, that's something that I think is something that they moved in the direction of doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it helps to have an upgraded talent like Zegras, and I wouldn't be surprised if Gurbenkin got some looks on the second unit.
I expect Bill, he is going to. I think at some point I would not be surprised at all, because again, one of the keys to creating chaos is having a net front is also having some level of net front presence, and that's something.
He's not afraid to go there. That's a good.
He's not afraid to go in those spots, and I think that's another thing that if Taket's working one-on-one with Gurbenkin, saying, "Hey, we get you out on the ice. Also, we may give you power play looks here, and the way you play is going to go a long way because it fits conceptually with what we're trying to do."
Yeah, the carrot and the stick.
Play,
yeah, go ahead.
For me, the power play for me is the thing I'm looking forward to the most this season, because for me, really, I mean, and Zegras even strength, I want to see what he can do. But I was excited with maybe Michkov and Zegras together, even strength. Now I'm going to have to potentially settle for them, at least maybe at the start of the game, power play. But I'm really excited what that power play can do. Drysdale, I think, having a fully healthy offseason, I'm really intrigued to see what he can do, and the power play is going to be a big part of that. And then, we'll see how the other guys fit in. I do long term. I mean, this is a few years away, but I think that a guy like Jack Nesbitt could be really good in that net front spot, because he's so good at deflecting pucks, and he's scrappy, and he's a big body. So, one day I kind of am just drooling about the idea of like a Michkov, Martone, Zegras, Nesbitt, Drysdale power play. Something like that would be exciting. But right now, I'm very excited based off of what we saw preseason with what Michkov and Zegras could do on the power play with some Drysdale on there to kind of see what those guys can do and then who fits in the best with them eventually.
And Nesbitt was fascinating to me to watch throughout rookie camp, preseason. Again, the skating still needs work, but I definitely saw some. And again, he still has time. He's going to go back to junior. He's going to play at Windsor and have those opportunities. But you saw as a scout friend of mine once told me about Nesbitt. He says the more you watch him, the more you really start to fall. I don't want to use the phrase fall in love, but really, really like him. Like and it's like the one thing that's necessary is the skating has to get up. But if it gets to at least Couturier level, I guess, in this circumstance, because Sean was not a Burton. Sean, I think, still a better skater than given credit for. But even coming out of juniors, his foot speed was also a big question. And someone said to me, he said, "Can you imagine a bigger, meaner Couturier?" That's something that's worth trading your 2 first-round picks to move up in the draft to go get. Yeah. If you think that's what you're going to be getting. And I came out of training camp and Nesbitt going back to juniors going, they got something going there. They really do.
Yeah. And don't forget, Forrester's skating wasn't all that great, and look what they were able to do with him. So I think
the whole thing, Jeff, is getting with NHL speed. Just get it to it where you are not to the point of where you're struggling to keep up with the play. If you're able to stay with the play, I don't need you to, I don't need hyperdrive. I need good hockey speed more than anything. Good hockey speed. And again, as a center, my expectations for a guy like Nesbitt is angles, physicality, and understanding what it is you need to do in all zones. I think he already knows what to do in the defensive zone. That, to me, there isn't any question of that. Offensively, there's processing the game at that speed in the offensive zone, how that's going to come together. That may take a few years, but I like what I've seen of him so far.
Mm-hmm. Well, and is anybody else? That was the last one from me.
Yeah, I think we've brutalized him enough tonight.
Yeah. We're going to give our fearless forecast about some things, but before we let you go, I think the fans would want to know maybe what you think the Flyers are going to do this year, and if you had a Stanley Cup pick, because I know you made one earlier. So
I did.
Maybe you could repeat that for the folks who missed it.
So for the Flyers, in terms of a postseason, the blue line's not there. It's just not. That to me, it's just too much. Also, again, forward wise, there's too many things they need to figure out for them as a team, and the team has also been very sort of kind of tampering down expectations. You want to see the combination. You want to see certain things trend in a good direction, but I think they're also cognizant of the fact that they wouldn't mind another high draft pick this year at the upper end potentially of this draft. Whether whether they could get lucky and get in the McKenna sweepstakes or the Keaton Verhoff,
that's a kid
players. Yeah, and those kind of players, if you can potentially come out with a top line forward or a potential top line defenseman. I don't want to say 1D per se, but there's a lot of things about Verhoff I do like. But I think that's something. They're not a playoff team. Where they're going to be, I'm not sure. They're not a playoff team. I could be wrong, but I think too many things have to align properly for that to happen. Stanley Cup. I feel like, again, out west, especially after McDavid made his contract, resigning at 12.5 for 2 years, he's giving that team a long runway. He's giving that team a decent runway here for at least 2 seasons to have themselves in the mix. I do have Dallas in the back of my mind because I feel like Dallas has sort of been there. They're close. but how, under new coach, under Gulletson in this case, I that's probably my biggest kind of question mark. If it's Gulletson versus Knobloch in this case, Knobloch, I think, has proven himself to be a pretty damn good head coach in the NHL. So in the East, I do think it still comes down to Florida and Toronto in a second round playoff series, much like last year. I think whoever emerges from that ends up in the Stanley Cup final and might be the Stanley Cup champion when all is said and done. So I think that's kind of where I'm at in terms of that. I don't necessarily believe anybody in the Metro per se gets to the final. Listen, I know John Tortorella mentioned New Jersey. We know why he mentioned New Jersey. He's
Brad
Keith Shaw. You have to remember they both are. That being said, they're a fun team to watch, the Devils, and if things can click together, that'd be fantastic for them. But there's just nobody I feel like in the Metro where I feel strong enough to say that seems like a team that's going to go to the Stanley Cup Finals. Even Carolina, I think it's still end up in the conference finals, and just they kind of hit. Once they had to play a big physical team like Florida, or even again, we'll see against a team like Toronto in this case, which I think has enough skill to match what that team does. Plus, I think Toronto's got their blue line, I think, is pretty good now. I think they put together a pretty good blue line. It's not it's not at the level of what Berube had in St. Louis. But they've got a lot of depth. And I think if Riley can rebound from kind of a ho-hum year last year and Riley plays like I think he can play, I think Toronto's there. I think Toronto can be there. Finally.
Wow. Wow.
They won't win. They won't win.
Well,
I don't know. Toronto gets to the final. Now, if it's Toronto-Edmonton, that is completely a toss-up series. But if it's Toronto-Dallas, I could see Toronto, if they get on a good run and they get that sort of feeling that they can do it finally, I could see it happening for them.
Would Mike Agello survive that?
A Toronto Stanley Cup championship?
Yeah, I think I've just
spontaneously combust. After all the years, I mean, he might. Yeah, I mean, he was literally giving me the sign of the cross today on the podcast. Hey, don't do it. Too bad, Mike. And I'm not doing this to be vindictive, and it's not. And Kevin Allen also was kind of in the same boat. He likes Toronto as well. So and there's reasons to like Toronto. He's like, well, I know other people will be picking Toronto because they're being vindictive. I'm looking at it and going, it's a good team. They, we'll see how they compensate for losing Marner, but I feel like they might figure out a way somewhere during the season to you're not going to get a Marner back, but you can get something that clicks in with the rest of that lineup that could really coalesce everything. And again, Berube's been through he's coached, he's been through the wars. He's been through those situations. He's now also tasted a pretty bitter defeat, obviously, in last year's Game 7. So
yeah,
he's seen both sides of it.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely. So, Anthony, where can people find your work? I know you're at Hockey Hot Stove and you're on Off the Post Radio.
Yeah, those are my two primary outlets. Those are the two primary outlets now. So my work is going to be, again, the writing. And again, it's been a great start, obviously. I mean, obviously I spent over a decade with Center Ice. Shout out obviously to Chris Rubert, the owner and publisher from Center Ice. It was, but the opportunity obviously and I've learned myself, Bill Meltzer and I go back over 25 years. We've known each other a very long time. And I think it was a great opportunity for us to kind of work together at a startup like Hockey Hot Stove in this case, and just the opportunity. And again, most of my work will be my writing work will be at Hockey Hot Stove exclusively. And obviously Off the Post Radio is now, obviously the flagship pod for Hockey Hot Stove for the website, because we're on a couple days a week, obviously. And, really, really excited. It kind of rejuvenates you in many ways. I mean, I never take for granted having the opportunity to cover hockey, covering the NHL over the years. But when you have sort of a new start in a new situation in this case, it does kind of, you feel the juices flowing, when you're writing, and the excitement of it as well. So yeah, again, hockeyhotstove.com is where you'll find my stuff. We're kind of teaming up together, me and Bill. Bill obviously being the COO of the site, but also obviously he's bringing over his vast array of knowledge and expertise, and I know obviously Haley Simon as well is doing her show now, Flyers Pulse, and doing a lot of feature work there. So kind of the three of us together are kind of like a coverage team, which is it's fun. I'm really excited with everything for sure.
That is terrific. And you can find you on socials, on X.
So you can find me on social media at my handle at Anthony Mingioni. So there's no spaces, no underscores. I'm on X. Facebook stuff predominantly being posted to the Hockey Hot Stove page. But I'm also on Bluesky if you're on there. Same handle, except it's anthonymingioni.bluesky.social. And Threads as well. I've also posted Threads as well. So those are the main places you'll be able to find my stuff.
Fantastic. Anthony, thanks so much for joining us tonight. We'll see you down the road very soon, I hope.
Yeah.
Much appreciated, guys. It's always great to talk to the three of you.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks again.
Have a good one. Take care, guys.
You too.
You too.
Wow. Yeah, that was we covered a lot of ground tonight. We didn't even talk about the incredible Ryan Ellis trade.
Yeah, that's true. There's a lot to talk about. We didn't even get to that. So, yeah. Dan, can you hear me? I think Isaiah's frozen.
Yeah, I can hear you. I don't know if Isaiah's a little frozen.
Okay.
Get people to pull that off.
Yeah. I think it froze up a little there, Isaiah. Dan, what did you think about the trade?
Yeah, no, that was a great piece of business by Danny Briere. Caught all of us a little bit off guard. It's always fun when they do something with Ryan Ellis because the NASCAR driver with the same name always does stuff on Twitter. Like, I can't believe I got traded, that kind of stuff. But it seems like, San Jose needed to get rid of 2 contracts so that they could, have an additional contract to sign, I guess, either Misa or Dickinson. And then the Flyers obviously now don't have Ellis's contract on the books, so they don't have to worry about putting him on long-term IR. They'll have a little bit of additional cap space this season, so it's a good piece of business for Briere. It sounds like him and Mike Greer are developing a nice relationship, so maybe we'll have more trades down the road between San Jose and the Flyers. But yeah, that was just nice just to have it off the books,
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, and I think they're right now with their current situation. The Flyers have something like $6.62 million in cap space.
Correct.
And that accrues as the year goes on. What's interesting with all the big signings, everybody under the sun who was supposed to be available this summer is signing practically, all the major ones. Who was it? Eichel, Kyle Connor, obviously McDavid with the discounted deal, like we talked about earlier. It begs the question right now, with the UFAs that are essentially going to be gone. I mean, I don't think the Flyers are going to go run after Adrian Kempe. I forget who else is going to be available, but really, it's going to have to be trade that the Flyers pursue these players. And I'm just curious, if that's the case, could they be pursuing an in-season trade to get a jump on the market? Because if they're competing against everyone in June or whatever, I mean, that's really a crapshoot. You have more players that you're targeting, but I wouldn't be surprised that the Flyers already have a list of names because of 2 years they have been targeting this offseason as the one that they want to get something done, if you will, to get a major piece, to take a step forward so they could say, hey, we're going for the playoffs this year. I don't see how it's possible if UFAs, they're going to have to make a trade. When is the best time to get that? And that's the really big question that comes to mind with all these signings.
And that's, yeah. No, I was just going to say, and that's where I like hearing the fact that there's already some rumors of stuff like Andre and Tippett for Byram. I mean, if you look at the cap situation, the cap's supposed to go up by $9 million next season. With the expiring contracts and the expiring dead money that the Flyers have, they're literally going to have about $44 million next summer of cap space room. And Zegras and Drysdale are basically the only 2 guys who are going to need, substantial contracts. So they're just going to have a ton of money. And you're right, like with the UFAs that have already signed, that, I'm sure they were hoping to have a chance to go after McDavid or Kaprizov or maybe, an Eichel or something like that. But those guys aren't available. So they're going to have to figure out another way to do it. And look, Danny has always been very creative. They know that they've got to make a big splash. And maybe it'll be early in the season to do something. So we'll see. I'm sure that they will find a way to try and do something. Whether or not we'll like it and it'll pan out is something else. But, look, the McDavid thing, by the way, just a 2-year extension. I mean, it's hard thinking this far down the road. But I had some people telling me that there's no way that McDavid was going to look at signing with a team like the Flyers after. As my cat muted my.
Yes, feline biles. Yes.
Yeah, she's mad about McDavid too. But there's no way he was going to sign with the Flyers after this offseason, because they probably wouldn't be in a spot where he could be like, oh, I can go win a cup there right away, right? With him signing for 2 more seasons, who knows what happens, right? I don't know. Maybe it's more of an opportunity for the Flyers to maybe get him. But it's clear that we can't rely on stuff like that. So they're going to have to try and figure something else out. And look, I'm assuming we'll get to some of our predictions for the season, but they may be in a position to draft a pretty damn good defenseman next year, next summer. So who knows?
Yeah, but defenseman takes so long unless he's someone super talented like Schaefer. So yeah, Schiff, any comments? So I just wanted to go through some numbers and then we'll get to our predictions. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was, since we did the trade with with San Jose for Ellis, I was sitting there and looking at, like cap space that the Flyers were going to get. I noticed they will finally be out of cap relief hell too next season, and they're going to have like close to $55 million. They have remember they took Carey Price's contract, and that's $10 million a year, so that's coming off the books next year. And they got a couple other players, like they only had 2 defensemen signed through this year. So, San Jose's got a lot of work to do too. And, it just was like, okay, I just thought, wow, I thought the Flyers had a lot of money, and then I saw that.
That's the thing. Yeah. I mean, they're going to have to pay some kids in a couple of years. So they got, paying them a lot of money. Yeah. There's no doubt about that.
It's going to be excellent. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, last year, if you look at it, as we head into the final portion of our show tonight, and thank you so much for joining us. If you're watching us on YouTube, if you could give us some likes, we really do appreciate it. It helps us with the algorithm. And while you're at it, hit that notification bell for our next show and follow, subscribe. We really do appreciate that. So last year, the Flyers were 33, 39, and 10 for 76 points, finished 8th in the Metro. They were 24th in goals for last year. That has to improve. 28th in goals against with that defense and goaltending this year. I don't know, minus 51 in goal differential. They got to shrink that down. Let me see. The power play is 30th. That has to be better. The PK was 20th. I think it was 4th or 5th the prior year. So all over the place, room for improvement. And 9 out of the last 13 years out of the playoffs. 16 of the 17 prior to that, they were in the playoffs. So it's been so long, I shouldn't even mention that last part. But here's the thing I remember from last year, and I dug it out from Hockey Reference. Here's a number that maybe other podcasts don't give you. The Flyers had the league worst 29 really bad starts by goaltenders. Okay, more than 1/3 of the time. And we remember, whether it was Kolosov, Ursin, or Fedotov, the start was really bad. It's like they're letting in goals. It measures how many times a goalie lets in X amount of goals below expectation. And it passes a certain threshold and qualifies in what they call the RBS. You can check it out at hockey.reference.com. And the
RBS?
closest team.
Is that what you said? RBS?
RBS, yes.
Really bad shit? Yeah, okay.
Yeah. You could call it that, for sure. Really bad starts. And the closest one to the Flyers is like 21. I don't know if it was San Jose, Columbus, Buffalo, the usual suspects of horrible goaltending who hope to improve. Like we hope the Flyers will improve. So there's a lot of work to do here. And the Flyers are kind of stumbling. You can't say they're stumbling out of the gate. They didn't really play any games, but they weren't that impressive during the preseason, like I said to Anthony. So I think if you look at, it's really interesting because I looked at Money Puck and they had the Flyers still having like an 18.7 chance of actually making the playoffs, which is crazy. Versus a team like, Pittsburgh is 7.5, and I'm not going to go around and round, but actually greater than the Bruins. I think the Bruins are a better team. I guess it's relative to their division, but yeah, crazy.
Well, I'll say this: if you're looking for a prediction,
yes.
I think that they might slip into the playoffs. Unlike, and it's going to be like one of those last day of the year things, and it's not going to be necessarily because they were a great team. And I will tell you, there's going to be a lot of teams I think that falter down the stretch, and by losing, they're going to get in because somebody else gave them a lot of help, and they'll get that very last playoff spot, the last wild card one. And I think if you thought like in preseason we've seen some crazy OT games, expect this team to go to OT a lot this year. I just think you're going to see a high number of overtime games, shootouts. I just think that's where they're at. They're not going to give up, but I think they're just going to hang in there way too long. It's like, the girl, on a date, you hang around too long and you just ruin everything. But and if we're going for, let's just say if your prediction for Cup, I think it's Dallas Oilers in the West, and I think it's the Leafs and Canes when I think Dallas finally wins it again this year. Oh, okay. Isaiah froze up again.
I don't know if you're losing me or I'm losing you.
Dan's fine too, so I'm guessing.
Okay, ahead, could you repeat that for me? I think you zatzed out or I zatzed out.
Oh, I said that for in the West it's going to be Dallas and the Oilers, and the Leafs and the Canes in the East, and I have Dallas winning the Cup. So there you go. Dan?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, go.
Okay. Yeah, Dan, you go.
Okay, so I don't.
Dan,
think
you go ahead.
I don't think that the Flyers are going to be very good this season. I'm always wrong though. So when I think that they're going to be, now of course, wrong means that like if I think that they're going to be like, if I'm optimistic and think they're going to be close to a playoff team, they end up being really bad. And if I think that they're going to be really bad, usually they end up like closer to a playoff team. So it's kind of like that range that I'm talking about. But I don't think, I look at the Eastern Conference and when I look at our defense and our, hopefully Vladar is going to be as good as I hope. But I mean, I just don't know what teams in the East the Flyers are worse than necessarily. So I do have some concerns. I think that I would say they'll probably end up as a bottom 6 team. I know that the Athletic in their poll of all their guys, the Flyers are a bottom 6, bottom 5 team. I don't have a lot of optimism. I'm just sort of excited to see how Zegras does. And I think it's going to be a learning process with Tocchet. And I just think it's a transition year more than anything. And hopefully they can find a way to make some trades for some, a top tier defenseman really is the number one need for this team right now. So hopefully they can figure that out. My predictions, I think there's just going to be a lot of good juju in Edmonton this year. So I think that they will win the Cup this year. I just think it's probably time. I do think Carolina is going to be extremely good. I love the Russian defenseman that they've got, Alexander Nikishin, who came over from the KHL. He's been the best KHL defenseman for a few years running. He's a big, strong guy who he just delivers devastating body checks. And I think that's something that Carolina is going to be very welcome there, especially in the playoffs. They've got big, strong defensemen like Jacob Slavin, who's so good defensively, but he's not necessarily a guy that lays people out. And Nikishin he is someone that people don't want to mess with. So I'm kind of excited to see what he does there. I think that like a full season of Logan Stankoven is going to be exciting there. I think Nikolai Ehlers is going to continue his stellar play. So I would go with Carolina and Edmonton, and I think that I would pick Edmonton to win the Cup. So that's kind of where I'm looking.
Okay. No, it's a solid prediction. I think the Flyers are going to have 85 points this year. They'll probably be like ninth or worst team in the league. I think the goaltending, I think Vladar is going to show promise to the point where the Flyers might be ready to move on from Urson. And Vladar, obviously, they have another year in that contract, I believe. So I think that he might be the guy that they stick with. And Urson, I think I kind of lost faith in him. Hopefully, he can prove me wrong. As far as the Stanley Cup final, I have Dallas defeating Carolina. I like Carolina to break through in the East this year for a lot of the reasons that Dan mentioned. I think Dallas is just due. I think they were just, even as spectacular as Rantanen was, I think they were kind of like the sum of their parts. I think Rantanen is really going to elevate them. And I think if Ottinger can get over his the yips in the playoffs, I think he'll give them better goaltending than Carolina will. But I do think it's going to be Dallas over Carolina. But it's so open in the West, and I do believe that the West will have an advantage this year. Whoever wins the West will probably win the Stanley Cup. So, any other predictions in terms of who the Flyers are going to, who's going to lead the Flyers in goals or Michkov or anything like that? Or
I think Forrester probably leads in goals. Konecny leads in points. Michkov leads in power play goals. I just think as far as, what else? I think Vladar is going to win more games than Urson and have over a 900 percentage. So, and that's something to think. That's something we need. If they can get, like I said, if they can get like league average goaltending, and I know the defense is crap right now, but I think that they know this, and I think they're going to make an in-season trade like we talked about. And I know it's expressed my interest in it. And if in case that you have Tippett and Andre on the worm, the hook on the worm, and at the trade, I think you can get fairly something, but you're going to have to throw in like a number one pick in order to get something of consequence back, I think.
I think that Michkov will probably end up leading the team in goals and points, and I just think it's probably his time. I think it's going to be him or Konecny. I don't know. I would be shocked if Tyson Forster leads the team in goals, just because I don't even think he's going to be on the top power play unit, and he's not going to be on the third line. But I would love for you to be right, because that means that Tyson Forster is going to have a massive year.
I think he is, yeah.
Yeah, that would be exciting. I mean, he could certainly work his way up to the top power play. And if that happens, maybe he could lead the team in goals. I think probably Michkov and Konecny will be the guys, but I'm hoping that Zegras also comes into that conversation also for leading the team in points.
Yeah. I think the talk about Forster kind of being like a Mark Stone is starting to seem more realistic. Just the way I love the way he came back, didn't have the conditioning time that the other guys did. They just stepped on the ice and he looked like such a pro. I think he's going to be a hell of a player, but I don't think he's going to lead a team in goals. I think I agree with Dan. I think it's going to be Michkov. I think Michkov is going to have between 75 and 80 points this year. So a slight increase over what he did. And I guess the big thing is whether Zegras sticks center, because if he can, it changes the Flyers' outlook at center ice. And if he can't, well, it's back to the drawing board. And would he be happy as a left wing? But after 3 years on being a left wing, it might be too late for him to change back. We'll see. So before we get out of here, just wanted to acknowledge the Flyers will honor Bernie Parent this season. There'll be a number one patch on the shoulder of the jerseys, beginning with the home opener. Number one on the ice behind the nets, and a public celebration of Bernie's life on November 21st at the Xfinity Mobile Arena, and the Flyers Devils game in honor of Bernie on November 22nd. So rest in peace again, Bernie Parent. So we're going to call it a night there. Chef, people can follow you on X, and why don't you give maybe a final thought and your handle?
You know what? Enjoy it, because the one thing is for sure. They might not be the best team. They might not be the worst team. They might not even make the playoffs. And who knows? Hell, they know. They're going to be entertaining, I think, though, this year. I think they're going to be in more games than not. I think you're going to see, like I said, that these games are going to push to overtime, especially Flyers after dark on the West Coast, because I don't think the the West Coast teams are going to give the orange and black any kind of respect, and I think they're going to catch them off guard. So that's what I think. And if you want to argue with me, you can definitely argue with me. And you can find me on X at Chef to the Left B on X, or, click on the O&B Puckcast and you'll see us there.
You got it, Dan.
Yeah, you can find me on Bluesky and on X at dsilver88. Got the dsilver88 pillow right behind me with the Lindros jersey there. And, like I said, I'm excited for hockey tomorrow night. I am excited the first time they go in the power play. I want to see some of the chemistry evolve. And that's, for me, really the season's about Michkov and Zegras, and maybe seeing what kind of steps Drysdale can take and seeing how the Tocchet era unfurls and where we go from there. This is not the most pivotal year, but it is a pretty pivotal year and a pivotal next offseason. So I'm just excited to get it underway. I'm excited for next summer when we'll be past the point where the leaders of this franchise are going to be telling us that we need to keep waiting and waiting, because their whole timeline leads towards next summer is the one where everything really accelerates. Yep. So I'm just glad we're kind of entering that final stretch into that where it's going to be put up or shut up time. So we'll see what happens.
You got it. I think the Flyers have promised that they want to improve this year, and I think they're going to make at least one major move to do that. I just don't see how they can do anything else. If they wait till the summer, there's going to have a lot. They're going to have a lot of competition, and I don't think they're going to wait. I think they have a lot of irons in the fire. And as we saw with Elliot Freeman talking about the defense, they already have some, and they're valid. So maybe some of that's what Anthony DeMarco called spitballing. Maybe it wasn't so much spitballing after all. We'll find out. We'll get Anthony on here one of these days. But anyway, you can follow the O&B Puckcast on X and Bluesky at O&B Puck at O&B Puck. Also on GETTR at O&B Puckcast. And of course, you can follow the O&B Puckcast on several podcast platforms, including Apple, Spotify, iHeart, TuneIn, and Amazon Audible. And of course, we're on YouTube and Facebook. And just type in O&B Puckcast, and it'll pop right up for you. Like and subscribe. We really need that. It moves us up the charts if you follow, and it helps us out with the algorithm when people are looking for Philadelphia Flyer podcast. So, hey, that's it. That's our season preview show for tonight. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll be back sometime next week. And until then, everybody, thanks for listening tonight. Take care.